Well, good morning to all the panelists that are on the table with me, and also to the participants. Today, we gather to address a profound and often overlooked issue, the rights of families of missing migrants. These families hold a dual role in the migration context, as duty bearers with the right to know the fate of their loved ones and as key information holders, essential to the process of identification and search. Ensuring their safe and unbiased access to official reporting channels is vital, particularly when exploitation risks loom in irregular migration settings. Our discussion stems from the recommendations outlined in Resolution 2569/2024 by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which emphasize critical steps such as removing biases in reporting and search processes, irrespective of individuals' administrative or criminal status, streamlining the issuance of legal documents to aid families in accessing rights and services, facilitating expedited visa processes for families to participate in identification and repatriation efforts. The explanatory report, Doc 16037, further brings to light the profound psychological impact of ambiguous laws on families. It highlights administrative and legal barriers that compound their struggles, such as difficulties in obtaining death certificates or accessing essential services. Here, community organizations and NGOs play a pivotal role, providing critical support such as legal assistance, psychosocial aid, and advocacy for dignified case management. I would also like to highlight the resolution at the Committee of Ministers adopted in 2012, which addresses the presumption of death in cases of missing persons, promoting common principles among Council of Europe member states. It highlights the need to ensure legal rights for affected families, streamline administrative procedures, and harmonize criteria in situations of disappearance due to conflicts, disasters, or mobility. It also emphasized the importance of striking a fair balance between the rights of missing persons and their relatives. Our esteemed speakers today exemplify dedication to advancing this cause. I'm going to give the word to Batul Kariba, this is on my left. So she's going to you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that I met most of you yesterday, but I'll introduce myself again. My name is Batul Karbijha.
Excuse me, I didn't do that.
No worries.
I can do it. Do it.
Yeah. Okay. My name is Batul Karbijha. I am a documentary filmmaker and a journalist. And I am the chair of the Association of Families of Missing Asylum Seekers. But most importantly, I am also a sister of Maysoon. This is my sister, Maysoon. On 24th, she looks like me. 24th of August, 2014, she boarded a boat of the coast of Zouara, Libya, along with hundreds of others, desperate to reach safety, to live a life with dignity, but the boat sank, and Maysoon never came back, and her body was never found. We were told that she had drowned, but we were never told where or how, or if she was among the dead recovered or those who remains at the bottom of the sea. We were told to move on, as if, grief without a body is something to fold away. As a family, we didn't stop there, so we searched, we investigated, we uncovered details about coordinates about mass graves in Tunisia and Libya. But everywhere we turned, we encountered closed doors. No one was willing to listen to us, and no authorities would take responsibilities. The only support we could get is from organizations whose role was more into documentation but no action. And we as a family are not alone there. Our association, AFOMAS, was born out of shared pain, shared loss, shared anger, and common fight for truth and justice. In AFOMAS, we are mothers who still keep the clothes of their sons in the closets, hoping that they are coming back. We are children who can never tell whether their parents are alive or not. We are families who have never been given a chance to say goodbye. We gather our stories, we document our case, and above all, we demand that our missing are not forgotten and our rights and theirs are not ignored. We demand the truth about the fate of those who went missing along the migration routes. We call for justice mechanism to address cases of missing person and for the active participation of families in these efforts. And we urge the establishment of support network for the relatives of missing migrants. And we call for concrete measures to prevent future disappearance. And when we talk about preventing, we are talking about legal paths for them to come to Europe, not push back and not put more restriction to them. What we face actually as families is not just grief. It's a systemic failure of recognition of our rights and the denial of memories of our loved ones. According to IOM, these figures were mentioned yesterday many times, but I'll mention them again. 72,000 migrants have died or disappeared globally since 2014, and of those, more than 31,000 died crossing the Mediterranean. And these are only the cases we knew about. Last year alone, nearly 9,000 deaths were recorded, the highest ever in a single year. But even these statistics mask a deeper crisis. The majority of those people remain unidentified. And their families, like mine, are not informed, their bodies are not found or named, and their stories just disappear and vanish. And this is not a humanitarian failure. This is a legal failure. Laws, as mentioned in the resolution of 2569 adopted by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, guarantee the right of life, the right to know the fate of missing relatives, the duty of states to investigate disappearance. But these rights mean very little when no authorities takes responsibility. When death happen in border zones or high sea or detention centers, we see a vacuum of accountability. And in this vacuum, people do not disappear only physically, but also administratively, also morally, and politically. In our association, we receive a lot of questions like, where do I go to report my missing one? Where are their documentations and fingerprints? How can I give a DNA sample? Will anyone ever call me back? Often we receive no answer, no phone line, no database, no follow-up. In many cases, our missing are presumed illegal, unworthy of record, and therefore unworthy of investigation. And so we are left not only with this ambiguous loss, but total administrative abandonment. We like to express our full support to the resolution 2569. We also want to reaffirm the importance of adopting the ICRC definition of missing persons, because our loved ones are truly missing and must be recognized as such. We strongly support the establishment of national focal points for missing migrants, as previously recommended, while emphasizing the need to safeguard the security and the confidentiality of information related to us and to our missings. It's also essential for us to acknowledge and appreciate the work of international entities like IOM, ICMB, ICRC, and we call them to remain committed to the ethical standards of search and forensic investigation, and most importantly, uphold the victim-centered approach that respects the dignity of the missing and the rights of their families. And we also would like to highlight the importance of cooperation of the UN mechanisms such as the IIMB, Independent Institution of Missing Persons in Syria, that also supporting efforts to locate our loved ones on the migratory routes. We hope that enhanced cooperation between international organizations, governmental bodies, and civil societies, both in Europe and in country of origin, will accelerate the process of search and identification. And we are offering actually concrete steps. Create a coordinated and state-supported mechanism for identifying missing migrants and informing families. That must include the appointment of the focal point to serve as clear points of contact for information sharing and coordination. And these focal points should also work within cross-border DNA database. Recognize the disappearance of migrants as a human rights issue. Stop treating it solely as a border control problem. It is a matter of international humanitarian law, human rights law, and moral responsibility. The disappearance of migrants is not just statistics. It's a global tragedy that affects real people like ours. And please involve families directly in decision making. Do not speak about us without us. That's the main thing. And let people affected be part in shaping the policies that concerns their life. When a European citizen goes missing, there are always systems in place. There are protocols, there are teams in search, there is media coverage, there is public outrage, there is remembrance. Why is it different when the missing is from Syria or Eritrea or Afghanistan or Somalia? I'm really struggling to understand that. My sister Maysoon was 21 years old when she went missing. She was studying architect. She liked poetry and pistachio ice cream. She is like your sister, your son, your daughter. She is not just a number in a report. She is not such a missing migrant. She was and is still my sister. And like hundreds of others, she deserves to be found and at very least acknowledged. When migrants go missing, their families do not just disappear. We remain, we ask, we remember, and we demand that the dignity of our loved ones to be restored through action. The right to know is not just optional. It's protected by the international law, by the human rights law, and by the conventions that you have all committed to uphold. So we are not asking to solve everything today. We are asking to take a next step. Focal point, mechanism, legal path forward. And we are not only looking for the dead. We are fighting for the living, for the right to mourn, to know and to be heard. People in this room, or some of us at least, have power, have budget, have mandates, and you have the law behind you. So we ask you, not for charity, not for pity, for justice and for truth and for dignity, for our missing, for their memory, for those of us still searching. Thank you.
Thank you, Batul Karia, because, we can give the floor to the missing migrants, but it's very important to listen to their families, to bring their names, some way the faces, and to make it real between of us, because people are moved by our heart. So to hear you, really, I'm thankful, because I ask you not to give up and to fight, because all the missing migrants, to get to know about your sisters, but also of the many missing migrants, to give them the voice, so some form we can hear them, and to keep fighting, so they could be identified someday. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, I am going to introduce Sarah Klingberg, Regional Advisor on Internal Displacement and Migration for Europe and Central Asia with the ICRC, has over 20 years of experience in migration, and works closely with PACE committees, championing the voices of migrants, and also translated from Italian perfectly. Thank you.
Bonjour. Good morning. Thank you very much. It'll be difficult to take the floor after Batul. This has been said several times, yesterday and today. Behind every missing migrant, there is a family living with unspeakable pain. Like Batul, these families never give up their search. They move heaven and earth, they cross borders, they brave administrative, linguistic and legal obstacles. Very often they do this alone, with very little support. They get into debt, they sacrifice everything they have to find a face, a voice, a sign of life. The ICRC, with the National Societies of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent, work with the authorities and other stakeholders to prevent family separation on the migration routes. We help migrants and their families to maintain or re-establish contact, facilitate the search for and the identification of missing migrants in order to provide answers to families. Now, before we look at possible recommendations, I would like to say two things. Batul has touched upon this. First of all, what do we mean by missing migrants? This is important. From our point of view, and this is recommended also in the text, a missing person is missing for their family, not for the authorities. This is important. It's not the same thing. And it's important to bear in mind the point of view of the families when they've lost contact with their loved ones. And secondly, it's important that this topic be addressed at the Council of Europe in particular. People tend to think that families are mainly in the countries of origin, but many of the families of migrants who go missing on land or at sea, those families are within the European Union. They're in Europe. They're here, whether they're here legally or not, but they are physically here. And this is why the authorities must think of cooperating with them. In May 2019, the ICRC, with the IOM and the Argentinian Forensic Anthropology Institute, organized a workshop in Guatemala, bringing together experts from all over the world to discuss missing migrants. And what stemmed from that meeting was 3 recommendations. The first was to draft a number of guiding principles for the authorities or organizations to govern interaction between various stakeholders and the families of missing migrants. I'd like to recall 4 of those principles which could be useful for authorities and various organizations. First of all, states must identify and respond to the needs of the families of missing migrants and see to it that legislation and specific services be available to meet those needs. Because if you don't meet the needs of those families, there is no way they can make headway with their search. As Batul has just recalled, families have a profound need to know. And so it's important to take on board those needs, as well as the economic needs of these families and all their other needs, so that you can work with them and help them to make progress. Then there are two other issues for families. There's the issue, of course, of financial means. They usually devote all the money they have to their search. They publish advertisements, they travel. There are administrative constraints as well. It's difficult for them often to obtain visas, this has been said, or to identify a body found in another country. It's difficult sometimes for them to understand the procedures they need to follow, and often there's no proof of kinship. If it's a traditional marriage, for example, if there's no official birth certificate, all of those are also obstacles. Then there's the lack of information from the authorities or legal issues. A missing person, that is not a legal status in many countries. Then there's also the issue of the forensic identification of bodies that needs to take place to prove that someone's relative has died. And according to one of our studies, we've found that out of 15 missing persons, only one body is found. Only 380 bodies have been found out of over 5,000 deaths which were reported in official statistics. So all of this to say that states, first of all, must be able to identify and meet the needs of families so that they can make headway in their search. The second recommendation, the notion of family must be interpreted in the broad sense from a social standpoint, not only a biological one. Social bonds that are created during a journey are also essential. Migrants are often separated from their families for long periods. They can develop major ties with their companions during their journey. These other travellers might be cousins or uncles or half-brothers or sisters, and those persons also have important information in order to understand what's happened to the missing. In Spain, for instance, we help the Spanish Red Cross to reconstruct the list of the passengers of a boat by talking to the survivors, so that we can give families at least partial information, for example, to tell their loved ones, yes, this person that you're looking for was on that boat, to give them at least partial information. The third recommendation, as Batul and Tareke have said, families have to be involved as central actors at each step of the process, and their safety and well-being has also to be looked after. If we really want to make progress, we need a paradigm shift. Families are not persons who are affected. They're the first actors in the search process. They know, they fight, they're involved. But for them to fully play their role, they need a safe environment. They need specific mechanisms and procedures to be put into place. The families are often not legal residents in a given country. They might fear reprisals. They might not trust in the authorities. This is why we need specific mechanisms and procedures so that these persons will feel confident enough to approach the authorities. Clear contact points need to be established and made known. We've talked about the focal points. They're so important. to bring together various stakeholders at domestic level in a given country, to establish links with families and to clarify the procedures. The associations of families in this context are essential pillars. They create bridges. They can make sure that the information is known. They can disseminate it. They make sure that the families are not left alone. And the last recommendation is that the families need information about all the procedures linked to the disappearance of their relatives, about search mechanisms, identification procedures, the issuing of death certificates or of visas for humanitarian reasons, repatriation of remains. These procedures need to be made easier for them. To conclude, we must stop considering families only as victims. They are the first concerned, they're strong actors, they're allies, and the involvement of families is indeed essential if we want to ensure identification and provide answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for your recommendations that really are important steps on this long ladder to get on the top of the really get the know the situation. The family needs, as I say, to be listening and to be present in all the procedures, because they are the voice that we can hear of the persons that have been missing. Yeah. So hope we can do something from now on. Now I give the floor to of Methodia's First Rights, Last Rights projects has tirelessly defended the rights of marginalized migrant families and contributed pivotal evidence to base reports on migration. Please, you have the floor, Mr. Balto.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our hosts and our organisers here at the Council of Europe, and particularly to Assembly Member Palka and all his work and perseverance in raising these difficult issues and bringing it to such fruition here. And we, as the Last Rights Project, are very privileged to be able to provide assistance in the evidence gathering and recommendations process bringing together this report. I'm very flattered. It says on my badge that I'm an expert, but although I may be a lawyer for rather longer than I imagined, I would never consider myself to be an expert in this. We found ourselves, Katrina as my co-director, in 2015, like many others, on the front line of an unfolding humanitarian crisis for refugees and migrants in the Aegean, and found ourselves doing things we never thought we would, and finding the grotesque gaps in provision at that stage, particularly when there were multiple casualties, as frequently was the case off that coast. Not least when we responded to a mass casualty incident in that year where there were only 2 mortuary spaces on the island, and we managed, with other people's help, to airlift an emergency refrigerated morgue to the island to at least stabilise the condition of many people's bodies, to give them a little bit of dignity and to enable our forensic experts and our colleagues to begin the process of identification and laying to rest. And it was really out of that that our work began, and we are on that learning process with families and with other organisations. We hope we've learnt something of value so far. In 2018, the Global Compact on Migration included expressly for the first time in its Objective 8 a duty on states to prevent harm and death on migration journeys. But since then, there's been a remorseless increase in deaths on those very journeys. and a relentless increase in reports of violence and other harms perpetrated against migrants, and an even more hostile environment of border security and exclusion of migrants from even the most basic forms of protection. The same assaults on civil society organizations, activists and human rights defenders have gone hand in hand, and I'm talking here about the actions of states and their agents, not just the actions of traffickers, smuggling gangs and of organized crime. They're the very same states that signed the Global Compact and the same states who signed and ratified our fundamental international human rights treaties. These are not discretionary or arbitrary or occasional obligations to be ignored, suspended, or revoked when inconvenient. And indeed, the writing is on the wall behind us, as Batul reminds us, that this is a human rights, a democracy, and a rule of law issue. What's clear to us, unsurprisingly, as it is to many others engaged in this area of human rights work, is the increasing frequency and different levels of criminalization that are being deployed, not just against migrants, but against those of us in civil society who seek to save lives and prevent avoidable deaths and work alongside and with families. The UK's Cranston judicial inquiry into the deaths of at least 27 people in a sinking of a boat in the English Channel on the 24th of November 2021 has not yet reported formally, but it has completed its evidence gathering and hearings, which already illuminated the lack of training, the lack of urgency, the lack of coordination between states and non-state deployed search and rescue operators, and how presumptions and stereotyping of migrants may have influenced the approach to the urgency and level of resources needed, and the lack of information for people in peril that the experts to that inquiry said could have improved their chances of survival. Those experts presented evidence that there was no effective triage of mass casualties in the sea, and they identified the need to give people in boats in distress urgent information about how to increase the possibility of survival in the water. They said that that information could and should have been available to migrants before they even embarked on these journeys. But the very civil society groups and networks who try to support vulnerable people are themselves the target of government operations to disrupt the smugglers' business models, to smash the trafficking gangs, and to end the evil organised crime and trade in people, their words. Assisting the vulnerable has been transformed into alleged collaboration, encouraging and facilitating. These policies of criminalisation are now increasing across Europe. The Fundamental Rights Agency reported now quite a while ago on civil society rescue operations and listed all the search and rescue vessels and their owners who've been prosecuted and prevented from providing life-saving operations. And that theatre of operations has now been very effectively sanitised, clearing away the space of civil society actors. The Last Rights Project has worked with many other civil society actors across the world to formulate and advocate for the basic rights of people on the move to be treated with dignity, to respect their right to life, and to do everything possible to prevent deaths and develop effective national and international mechanisms and systems to trace, recover, and identify those whose deaths were caused on such journeys, as well as processes that provide not only answers for searching and grieving families, but accountability and some kind of remedy. In May 2018, along with, I think, around 50 other civil society organisations from around the world, we met on Lesvos to formulate and sign what became known as the Mytilene Declaration for the dignified treatment of all missing and deceased persons and their families as a consequence of migrant journeys. That was, as Maurice mentioned earlier, with the strong encouragement and participation of his predecessor, Agnes Calamar, and others. But it was vital that we had input from families, and that was very much developed with and from a family perspective, including our colleagues from the Argentine Forensic Anthropology team. That document contains a list of rights that we express on behalf of deceased and bereaved and their bereaved families, and it doesn't provide any or require any new law. It's all based on existing human rights obligations, but it articulates that in a practical sense. I won't put it up on the screen, but in effect there are 10 specific recommendations relating to the support for families not to be subject to administrative detention, to choose the civil society organisation they wish to represent them, and for legal representatives to assist in many processes which have become very complex and legalised. The right for families to be kept informed and to give informed consent at all stages of investigation, and to be provided with all necessary documentation. And the list goes on, and we talk about funeral arrangements and the right to enter a country to participate, but also the right to ensure that it's the family's wishes in the means and manner in which cultural rituals and forms of burial are observed, and indeed the final resting place of persons who find themselves deceased a long way from their homes. So I won't go through all of those, but there is two recommendations which we really ought not to forget at the end of that children are part of families. They are often silent in all these discussions, and there are many children who are both who've died on journeys but are now orphaned and left with no alternative care. And we really need to speak in much more detail about the best interests of the children who are left behind and the rights that they have in relation to their families. So I'll end there because I'm very mindful of the time, but thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sid. Well, the three of you have brought us unique perspectives and expertise that enrich our understanding and pave the way for useful solutions. Let us approach this with the dialogue that we are going to have now, the questions and answers, with sensitivity, advancing efforts to clarify the fate of missing migrants while upholding the rights and needs of their families holistically, which is also very important. Thank you for all your attention, and thank you to the secretaries and interpreters for their help. You have the word.